Welcome to Storytime with Pete. I'm Pete. It's the show where we take a deep dive into the good, the bad, and the downright confusing of economic current events. Because, let's be honest, what happens in Washington and on Wall Street has a way of making its way to your wallet, whether you like it or not. And today we're talking tariffs, specifically President Trump's latest round of tariffs on imports from China, Mexico, and Canada, and how they're shaping everything from job creation to the price of your next trip to the grocery store. How did we find our way back to eggs? Let's start with the upside. Honda just announced it's moving production of the next generation Civic Hybrid from Mexico to Greensburg, Indiana. Boy, is my college roommate going to be excited. That means jobs, baby. Local economic growth and a boost for American manufacturing. And, well, Honda isn't alone. Companies across multiple industries are reevaluating where they make things, realizing that producing domestically might now be the cheaper, smarter move. I never thought that was possible, if I'm being honest. Steel and aluminum production, industries that have been struggling for years against cheaper foreign competition, are also seeing some benefits. With tariffs making imported metals more expensive, American mills are ramping up production. So that means the more jobs in places that were hit hard by offshoring over the last few decades. And we've all seen it happen. But, and well, you knew there was a but, tariffs ain't free. They don't make foreign goods cheaper, they just make them more expensive. And guess who pays for that? You and me. Let's talk about cars. Not exactly a car guy, but let's talk about cars. While it's great that Honda is shifting production to Indiana, the reality is that vehicles assembled in the U.S. still rely on parts made all over the world. With tariffs adding extra cost to those imported parts, automakers will either have to eat those costs, which they won't, or pass them on to consumers, which they will. That means higher sticker prices for new cars. At a time when financing a vehicle is already painfully expensive, especially with interest rates. Now, it's not just cars. These new tariffs are hitting Chinese imports particularly hard. That means electronics and clothing and home appliances and even groceries could all see price increases. And if you're wondering why food prices would be affected, consider this. Mexico and Canada are two of our biggest agricultural trade partners. When they get hit with tariffs, they retaliate. That means higher costs on everything from avocados to beef. Well, now I want tacos. And then there are the small businesses, right? Many retailers and manufacturers rely on imported goods to keep their shelves stocked and their products affordable. If tariffs raise costs, small businesses either have to absorb those expenses, cutting into already thin margins for small business owners, or they have to pass them along to consumers. And in many cases, they just can't compete. And that could lead to layoffs or even closures of small businesses. Farmers have already been burned by previous rounds of tariffs, and this latest round isn't doing them any favors. China, Mexico, and Canada are all major buyers of U.S. agricultural goods, and when they slap tariffs on American exports in response to ours, demand drops. The federal government has stepped in with subsidies to help these farmers stay afloat, but those subsidies are ultimately funded by, taxpayers. So once again, the cost of these trade policies comes back to you and to me. And then finally, there's the issue of uncertainty. Businesses like stability. They like knowing what to expect so they can plan investments, hiring, and production. But when trade policy shifts dramatically overnight, companies hesitate. They delay expansion plans, freeze hiring, in some cases move production elsewhere entirely to avoid future costs. Now, that uncertainty doesn't just affect boardrooms, it affects job security and economic growth overall. So where does that leave you and me? If you work in an industry that benefits from tariffs like steel or aluminum or aluminium, if you're from the UK, or domestic auto manufacturing, this could be good news for job security. But, and it is a big but, if you're a consumer, which is all of us, expect to pay more for just about everything. If you own a business that relies on imported materials or sells to international markets, could be facing higher costs and tougher competition. Like most economic policies, tariffs aren't all good or all bad. I'm going to say that again. They are not all bad, and they are not all good. They're complicated, and their impact depends on where you sit in the economy. But one thing's for sure, these latest tariffs are already reshaping how and where companies do business. And that means changes are coming, whether we're ready for it or not. I'm Pete, and this has been Storytime with Pete.